Hello and welcome everybody to the Digital Classroom, the podcast where we dive into the integration of technology in basic schools. I'm Ellen, your navigator on this journey where we explore the digital innovations that are bringing education to life in ways we've never imagined. Today, we are diving into the fundamental concepts surrounding IT tools in education and their significance in modern learning environments. Joining us for this insightful discussion is Dr. Nkrumah, a psychiatrist whose journey from elementary school in Ghana to thriving in her role as a remote psychiatrist in the United States gives her a unique perspective on this topic. She will share her experiences and expertise as we explore the benefits of IT tools in education and their impact on student engagement, personalized learning experiences, and collaborative learning. Hello, can you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yes, thank you so much, Ellen. My name is Rebecca Nkrumah, Dr. Nkrumah. I am a psychiatrist. I was a substitute teacher for a couple of years, and I also worked as a resource aide in a special education classroom for a couple of years as well.
Well, that's great. Now, coming on to today's topic about the integration of IT tools, can you share your experiences transitioning from a schooling environment in Ghana where IT tools and educational apps were not widely used to the educational landscape in the United States?
Absolutely. Well, I will start by saying my experience coming to America was definitely a culture shock. I grew up in Ghana to the age of 14, and prior to that, I mostly lived in Ghana, didn't really travel outside of Ghana. Definitely in Ghana, like you said, low resourced. And so I had very limited access to computer, to technology. One funny story I have is when I came here, I started high school right away. And now I want you to go to Google and search for something. I don't even remember what she said. But I sat there and I was like, Google, well, what's that? Like, no idea, dumbfounded. And I just sat there and I had no idea. But all of the other students just kind of went there and started doing their thing. And I just sat there until the teacher came in and was like, oh, do you need help? And I said, yes. And she was so kind. And she showed me how to get to Google. And more importantly, she told the person sitting next to me, you got to help her. But as you can imagine, as a teenager, it was a little bit embarrassing. And also, it gave me an insight into how different things are and the advances in technology here. And I learned so much from that class. But I always remember that story because it just really highlighted kind of like the gaps in access to IT, access to technology, and in general in our education system in Ghana.
Thank you. Now, reflecting on your journey, how do you perceive the significance of IT tools in modern learning environments, especially in comparison to the educational system USB?
Definitely, that's a really good question. I will say, when thinking about education, thinking about technology, we also have to think about gaps, right, in disparities in access. And I also want to acknowledge that in Ghana, there is disparity in access, but also here, depending on where you are living and your ability to afford things, there's also that disparity, right? So a good example of that is when I first came here, I was in one school. It was more of an urban school, some resources, not as much. You would have some of my school friends come from other cities, and we're talking about here in California, to this school that's supposedly a better school to have access. But then we moved about 2 years later, and we moved to a different area, which was very highly resourced. And there, not only did I see that we had access to the basic IT stuff that we had in my previous school in the Bay Area, but this new place had more. Like we were expected to do PowerPoints, presentations, we were expected to do our own short videos, and we got exposed to technology in a way that I had never experienced before. So even though the transition from Ghana to here was very different, I also saw a transition from one school in the Bay Area to another school, and that was also different. But in all of it, one thing I will say is that a little bit of technology really opens your mind. So even the little that I got at the one school in here in America when I first came really opened my mind. So when I went to the other school, it didn't feel like I didn't know anything.
That's good. Now, as a psychiatrist, how do you believe the introduction of these tools in education can impact students' mental health and well-being in general?
This is a really good question, Ellen. As mental health and mental wellness is something that now in this country and actually in the whole world, even before pandemic, but more so now after pandemic, is such a big topic. And part of the thing with mental health is also the stigma around mental health, right? So as you can imagine, let's say pre-pandemic, you have a child in school that has some, let's say, learning disability, and they need to see a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but maybe they have to leave their school a little bit early so they can make their appointment. And their friends ask them, where are you going? Who wants to say they're going to go see their shrink, right? Nobody wants to say that. But now with virtual psychiatry, with remote work, now I can just send the child a link and they can even do their whole appointments in like a nurse's kind of office in their school. They can access a lot of tools. For example, I can send a child some questionnaires for them to screen their mood. How is your mood? How is your anxiety? How are your medications? And they can do it at their fingertip on an app. And the ability for kids to be able to have access to technology has really changed the landscape of mental health, and also just their ability to access much needed mental health services. And so it kind of all goes together. If you have a child that is not versed in being able to utilize tools because they don't know, maybe, for example, my story, how to go on Google, right? Or they don't have an app, they don't know how to navigate an app because maybe they don't have that resources to have. That really limits them, right? Not only in just their ability to learn and imagine, but also their ability to take care of their own health, right? So technology in that sense, every tool and skills that a child picks up in the education not only enhances their educational journey, but it kind of also enhances all other aspects of their lives, including their mental health.
Oh, right. That's great. Now, going back from your perspective, talking about how you were supposed to go on Google and all that, what are some of the key benefits of incorporating IT tools in education? Particularly in terms of enhancing student engagement, personalizing learning experiences, and facilitating collaborative learning.
The way the world is changing, right? Now we live in a world where there's a lot of collaboration, but it's not just collaborating between one student to the next in the same classroom. We're talking about the ability to be able to collaborate with students outside of your school, outside of the country, somebody remote, right? And so it's important for students to start learning about tools to help with that collaboration. So for example, you can have an elementary school student who live in the inner cities of, let's say, San Francisco. Maybe they're not as well resourced. Maybe their resources are a little bit low. But compared to somebody in Ghana, for example, this child has a lot of tools. They're able to use the internet. They're able to have apps. They're even able to develop and create different apps, develop and create robots and things like that. All of a sudden, this child can connect with a child, let's say in Ghana, and through technology be able to teach them things, be able to share their knowledge, be able to help them use some of the tools as well, right? So I think it's important that early exposure allows kids not only to be able to kind of develop their own imagination and really enhance their own learning experiences, it also opens up the door for them to be able to collaborate with people outside of their environments where they would not have otherwise have the opportunity to even interact with, to even call friends. Back in the days, I don't know if you remember this, but people used to have like pen pals, right? So you just write letters and then you wait a month for the letter and then you write again and things like that. But some people still do that. I mean, I think there's still value in that. But now with the way technology is, as a young learner, there's so many avenues for them to explore their imagination, for them to really enhance the world that they live in beyond their small area, their small kind of city, and really expand and be able to make connections. And so to me, I think that's just really also part of the importance of teaching kids about technology. And not only when you're teaching them, I think not only just limiting it to their own skills building, but also connecting it with, hey, how can technology help you make an impact in the world beyond your community? And I think it starts with teachers really planting that seed in the kids and saying, what you're learning is not only going to be useful for you, but you really can change the world. And these are some of the ways that you can change the world. And it also expands the child's worldview.
Now, with all this being said, there are some educators who are reluctant, I would say, to embrace the use of these tools. So what advice would you offer to such people, especially those in communities where there may be limited resources, but then they are still hesitant to use it?
Right, absolutely. What I always say is that I think we all, when given the opportunity, when we're shown that something can be beneficial, we all, at the end of the day, want to use it. So if, let's say, an educator is a little bit reluctant to use it, then I think as an institution, whether it's the school system or the credentialing system, we first want to assess and see, do we have enough training, right, for the educator to be able to feel confident and comfortable about being able to utilize these tools, right? It's one thing to say, oh, we've given all of the training, we've given all of the resources, and the educator is still not interested. Oftentimes, I like for us to go to the root cause, like what is causing? Is it a person that maybe grew up in an era where technology was not readily available and they have taught for many years without it? And so they still have that old school ways of doing things, and change is hard, right? Change is hard, but the same way that person now, maybe before they were using dial-up phone, right? Or maybe kind of having to go to a phone booth. And then cell phones came, and eventually, maybe reluctantly, but they got on board. And I can imagine if you ask most people, even older people, they'll tell you, yeah, cell phones are great. There's so much I can do with it, even when they're hesitant to use it at first, right? So that's similar to just any new experience. It's hard. Change is hard. Sometimes it's hard to learn something new. Sometimes the old is just easier. And so that I would say that's the first thing that I would say is let's pretty much assess what is the hesitancy around? And is it something that we can mitigate? And oftentimes training and patience, and also acknowledging and saying, hey, I know there was a way we used to do it before, and I know that you're used to that. And I can understand how anxiety provoking trying something new can be. So let's work together, right? And then give the educators like milestones to reach, like, okay, maybe just incorporate just a little bit. Let's just see how it goes. And so you get my point?
Yeah.
So like first start there. And then once you kind of started there and kind of gotten them comfortable, then you can maybe also bring in the approach of, hey, look, let's look at the student's perspective too, and how important it can be for the student, right?
Yeah.
And so it can be, you can use, because most teachers care about their students.
Yeah.
So even if they're kind of anxious, sometimes they'll do it because they care about their students and they want the best for their students. So I would say just figure out what the issue is and kind of slowly and gently support them and wrap them with enough support. And when they make a mistake, just keep going and try again. And before you know it, even the ones that are reluctant will start to come around.
And to our very last question, looking ahead, how do you envision the future of education with the continued integration of IT tools?
Well, I mean, I feel like the future is bright. I mean, I think IT tools will continue to really be at the forefront, especially if you being in the Bay Area and kind of we're at the sort of at the cutting edge of technology, I would say. And we're always innovating and developing new tools. I mean, now with like AI, things are like at a different level. I mean, I definitely do see some potential challenges with that, right? So we haven't talked about a lot of the challenges, but like I can imagine, like with AI, like kids maybe will be able to go to online and copy assignments, and then obviously we will find kind of like ways to ensure that doesn't happen as we learn about it. But I feel like the sky is the limit. I feel like IT tools will continue to be what we rely on. I mean, like now you have kids in kindergarten learning robotics, right? Learning how to code, learning how to do so many different things. I moved to the United States 22, so let's say 22 years ago, right? And I had probably seen a computer one time. That's it. I didn't have access, never been on Google, like I shared my story. But in 20 something years, I have picked up so much technology, and even technology has changed tremendously in that amount of time, right? So it's only going to change. It's only going to get better. And now with like, we haven't even talked about social media at all, right? And how people are learning many great things on social media. I mean, also has its definitely a lot of issues, but so there's so many ways that technology and technology tools have really changed the landscape of education and really changed all of us. I only see it getting more robust, allowing people to do so many things. And one thing that I didn't mention that I think it's important too is even in the United States, as I said, there are people that come from limited resources, but technology really can transport people to worlds that they never imagined, right? Exactly. So you have a kid being here in San Francisco who doesn't even have a passport and cannot even afford to travel to France or China or UK. And all of a sudden, they're able to see the Eiffel Tower just by virtually or in ways that back in the days we couldn't. So I think it will only continue to just really enhance children's learning. And I'm just really excited for that change.
Okay, that wraps up our discussion on IT tools in education. We would like to extend our sincere gratitude to Dr. Nkrumah for sharing her valuable insights and experiences with us today. Thank you, Dr. Nkrumah.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be part of this, and I'm really excited for the future for all of us.
Great.
Thank you.
As we've learned, IT tools play a crucial role in shaping modern learning environments, enhancing student engagement, and facilitating collaborative learning experiences. We hope you found this episode informative and insightful. Stay tuned for our next episode where we'll dive into the practical applications of IT tools in educational settings. Until then, I'm Ellen, and this has been the Digital Classroom. Thanks for tuning in. Be the change.